So I officially like to welcome everybody to the April meeting for Northwestern Pennsylvania Bee Association. And we've got an exciting topic coming in. So what we're going to do is go into a Q&A here. Can everybody hear me? And you could ask a question by just asking a question or raising your hand on the reactions, or by putting the just typing it in the chat room. We're really kind of honored to have Steve here because he has actually written a book. What's the name of it? Swarm Prevention or what, Steve?
Swarm Essentials.
Swarm Essentials. Okay. So as you know, we are before swarm season right now. However, it's coming up real quick. I usually, it seems to be almost like a middle of May. So let me ask the first question to Steve, and then Charlie, and then to Fred, who's on the panel. When do you, I know it varies from, give me a range when you think swarming will, if it's going to occur, will occur.
I actually caught our first one already down here I want to say Wednesday. About filled a half of a 5-gallon bucket. It was a massive swarm, huge. And when I dumped it into an 8-frame box, it was wall-to-wall bees on 8 frames, drawn out comb. So big swarm. That being said, typically about 2 weeks after dandelions is when you can expect to start seeing the first swarms. I don't know. Do you guys have dandelions up there yet? Probably not.
Yeah, we did. I talked to Charlie earlier. We have tons. I have tons up here. I'm on the lake. Mm-hmm. I just want to remind Steve that you're down in Pittsburgh area.
Right.
And but we've had first bloom last on the 7th and 8th a week ago.
But are they
really heavy now? In Lionsville, Charlie said they don't even have any yet.
No, it seems like the lakeshore seems to be a little bit warmer right now. The orchards are blooming, or were up until we got this cold. But down in my area, I'm still waiting. We've got a few stray dandelions on the warm side of a building, but otherwise it's still kind of waiting on them.
Yeah, we're full widespread here. I mean, they're everywhere. We started to see swarm cells last week. I opened up a hive that had swarm cells in it. I suspect, Charlie, Jim Fitzroy down here, talking to Jim the other day, and he and I are both in agreement that we're probably, with this cold spell, it's going to give a false sense of congestion within the colonies. So what normally probably would have pushed off swarms another week, I suspect this week we're supposed to go up to 70 on Tuesday. So I think we're going to get a big push of swarms, and then we'll just slowly increase from there. So we're in it. You guys are probably 10 days behind us, 2 weeks behind us, depending.
Yeah. How about Fred? Can we turn to you right now? What's your dandelion situation? And we probably already starting a super. Fred, are you there? Come in.
Yeah, it's a lot like Charlie reported. I have some dandelion patches that are blooming already, but the bees are all on the pear and cherry trees and the flowering trees right now for the most part. And that's the pollen that they're bringing in. So the dandelions are still lacking. Remember, I'm at 1,300 feet above sea level, so we're a little bit colder than the rest of you, even those in Erie County. So
and your
dandelions aren't doing anything yet, really.
How many miles are you from the lake there? I know you're above 90. I mean, below 90, south of 90. How many miles?
Yeah, I'm about 15 miles southeast from Erie's waterfront.
Okay, good. Back to Steve. So since swarming is happening and it's hard to reverse it, what are you doing to try to intercede, if possible, to eliminate that, if possible?
You're never going to eliminate swarms. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. You can minimize them. I'm adding supers. I'm giving them space, lots and lots of space. Most of this time of year, especially where we get caught flat-footed as beekeepers, is not managing the nectar. We're so worried about the queen laying and the buildup of the brood, etc. One of the causes of swarming is this increase in nectar storage within the brood nest, which also takes away the ability for that queen to have space to lay. So when you start to get that congestion within the brood nest from a spike of nectar coming in, that can jam up the brood nest. So if you provide supers early, even if you think it's too early, you get a lot of nectar coming in from these early sources, the fruit trees, the maples, those types of things. So if you give them a space to store that nectar and allow the queen to continue to lay, then the chances of her swarming are going to be minimized. I run all singles. So in my case, especially, instead of allowing that nectar to be stored in that single brood box, I'm allowing them or making them store it above so that queen can lay wall to wall in that single brood chamber. And the same applies to a double brood chamber, or 3 mediums for that matter. They start to backfill that brood nest. They start to fill that honey cap above her, and she feels congested. And that's where we start getting these swarms. So I think supering early is with drawn comb is going to be this time of year, especially your biggest, what's the word I'm looking for? Your biggest chance to minimize swarming. And then of course you could do splits and, all that kind of good stuff. But I think just managing the nectar flow is at this time of year is more important than managing the brood nest.
Queen excluder or not?
Yes. I run queen excluders, also called honey excluders. But when managed correctly, they work very well. Like I said, I run single brood chambers, and occasionally on the bigger broods, like I have a couple here, half dozen or so, that they are just booming coming out of winter as singles. And instead of adding supers, I actually added a second deep to them. So I'm going to harness that swarm energy and allow them to draw out comb and build, lay up that second deep. Because once that's done here in a couple of weeks, I'll split that off into another single and just add a queen excluder and then super. So I'm kind of taking away that energy from them and allowing them to grow to 2 deeps and then splitting them off.
Okay. Real good. Charlie, Steve actually addressed that pretty well. And the question is, we've got a bunch of new beekeepers. They don't have drawn comb. So what can they do? They have a box that's exploding, but they don't have drawn comb to put in their super. How should they handle that? Charlie, you're on.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure where to go with that, but I was going to say one of my misperceptions with supering early is that the real surplus doesn't seem to come in till about the end of May, but the other purpose for the supering is to just give the bees some headspace, so they recognize they've got a lot of space up above them. And because if you super too late after they already have the impulse, it's not going to help anything. They're already got their mind made up. But
so you supered already so far, is that correct?
Yeah, most of mine are supered already.
Okay.
The other thing you can do if you don't have a lot of drawn comb, you can checkerboard a few frames or a couple frames into foundation, like take a couple frames of brood from the bottom, move them up into the second box, keep them together so they can still, cluster well when the weather's chilly, but you're going to artificially expand that brood chamber for them. And so they're going to have to move more places. I exchanged 2 frames in the second box with 2 frames in the bottom box. Start with 2 and then watch it, in a week or so, see where they are. And, you can checkerboard drawn comb and foundation and kind of expand that brood nest a little slower.
When they have a lot of energy in this time of the year, in the springtime, they will draw the comb up pretty readily. Fred, you have any suggestions on that second question? Is how do we get new drawn comb? How would we be able to do that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about something that's very unpopular. Ross Conrad hates what I'm about to say.
Oh.
But that's Better Comb, which is the synthetic pre-drawn beeswax. It's chemically very similar to actual beeswax. And it comes from Better Bee and sold by a company called Hexacell in Hungary. And that is already drawn. The bees can work like regular wax. And you can put 3 or 4 of those in right above your brood box. And the bees work it immediately. So they clean the cells out and they can modify it and amend their own wax to it and everything else. There's another company that I'm not a huge fan of, but they make something called Permacomb, and it's plastic. The whole thing is solid plastic. I think they're losing a lot of traction. They're $8 a frame or something like that, but that's also emergency expansion equipment. But then you've got the cleaning issue later. The advantage to that is, I guess, just like plastic foundation, that the wax worms can't chew it, things can't damage it, and they drive a truck over it as part of their advertising, which makes it really meaningful for beekeepers. So, but those are the two. Better comb is pre-drawn, and the bees use it. I've tested it since 2019, and they put brood in it. They put their resources in it. They store pollen in it, so they use it just like they do their own comb. The argument is that now you've got adulterated beeswax from your hive. If you're going to render that and melt it down and make health products and things like that from it, but that's the stuff.
Can you harvest the honey out of that pretty well?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's used for honey harvesting. You do have to put it on wired supports. Originally, they came out with it, said to support it with toothpicks. That doesn't work because it just flexed out and everybody was mad. The other thing is it can't really handle high temperatures. So if you live in an area, we don't, but down south, if they have sustained temperatures in the high 90s, that stuff will actually warp and melt and deform, but you have to wire your foundations for that.
Okay, good to know. I'm done with my questioning to get things primed, so I'm opening it up to the group. If you have a question, go ahead and fire it. Write it down in the chat. I'll bring it up. But anybody else also in the group there want to ask some questions to these experts?
I think everybody's online ordering that better comb.
Yeah.
That stuff is good. I have a couple of supers of it, or boxes of it, just to try from a couple of years ago, and that's, I mean, it has its pros and cons like everything else, but yeah, it's definitely worth it.
Let me move to another topic here while people are thinking. Swarm traps, swarm commander, all the items that you're trying to bait. What's your feeling about setting up swarm traps? I'm open this to anybody who chimes in first. So
that was Fred. He put up, is that, what'd you have there?
This is Swarm Commander's new capsules.
Ooh.
So you carry them around in your pocket. You're setting up your trap. You crack the capsule and it leaks into the little cotton tip, and then you rub it around the entrance, rub it in the back, and leave the capsule in there. It's good for 20 days. This is not an advertisement.
I'll make the advertisement, Fred, because I had those since last year and they're awesome.
I'm so glad that Steve's here because he's endorsing everything that I'm doing, and I can't wait to quote him in all of my social media outlets.
I don't know if you can, let's see, there it is. There's my Swarm Commander, see?
Oh, that's the gel, isn't it?
No, I've got the spray. This is the spray. I don't know if I have gel here. I usually have a whole smorgasbord of stuff floating around here. And I had those vials, but they're actually now in the truck because I've been setting up swarm traps left and right here this week. But
okay, let's go back. We're talking about lures here, and what is a swarm trap? I know it's supposed to be 40 liters, which is a size of a D10. Can anybody kind of explain what this is for our new people and use Seeley's recommendation of putting it 55 feet in the air? I'm kidding.
And that's 60. It's he always recommends higher. No, swarm traps. Let me actually. I don't know if you can make me a co-host, Ken. I could show my.
Yeah, let me do it.
Let me give me a second. I could pull up my swarm. What do you call it? My swarm talk, and because in that I have.
Yeah, a picture is worth 1,000 words sometimes.
And it's not too early to set up some traps because the bees have been foraging and exploring since the weather broke. So they're going to remember those places.
And they have, you definitely want to get them up before the swarms actually start. So. Yeah,
because the scouts are out looking for things right now.
Yep. All right, let me get into my talk here.
Steve, you're on. You're good now.
Okay, great. Let me find. Nice. Yeah, let me find the.
Right there. Oh, you went past it, Steve.
Oh, there it is. Yep. Right there. Thank you. Boy, you're seeing it better than I am. All right. Yeah. So this is the actual guidelines by Dr. Tom Seeley. So his ideal setup is a 40-liter box, which is about a 10 frame box. He recommends a 2.5 square inch opening, which is essentially a 1 3/4 inch diameter circle. He's saying at least 10 to 15 feet high, facing south, well shaded so that it doesn't overheat. Shape doesn't matter and color doesn't matter. So there's lots of different sizes and shapes out there and people designs. My setup is this. I use an 8 frame deep. All of my swarm traps are straight up swarm traps. I don't use them for anything else in my operation. So an 8 frame is about 35 liters. A 10 frame is about 43. So you're right in between there. I don't like the 1 3/4 inch opening. I think it's too big. So I've shrunk it down to 1.5 inch, either a circle or an elongated opening, which is about 3/4 inches by, I think, 3 inches long. I use migratory tops, solid plywood bottoms. I use Advantech, which is a weatherproof plywood. Prices have gone through the roof on all that stuff. So, use what you can at this point. And my first 6 frames are undrawn foundation. The 7th is an old brood comb. And then the 8th is undrawn foundation. That is just to give them one, if I don't get to them in a week or two, they could continue to draw out comb. The drawn brood, not only does it give some odor, but it also, and this has all been confirmed by Dr. Seeley because I run it by him, but he agrees with it, is that drawn brood comb gives the bees the kind of impression that, hey, it's this box is pre-approved. There's already been bees here before, so great. And he actually did say that it actually cuts down on the amount of time the scouts spend at that swarm trap. If they go in there and there's old brood comb, they pretty much deem it good, and that actually shows preference over a box that doesn't have brood comb in it. I set mine 6 to 8 feet high because I don't feel like carrying ladders around. I use Swarm Commander as a lure. I face them south. I put them in well-shaded areas because an overheated box it may attract a swarm, but they could abscond within a day or two if it gets too hot. And I paint them for concealment purposes, but I also put lighter paint around the opening for contrast. And this is what my boxes look like, essentially. Oh, so I have number tags because right now I have about 40 traps set out. Around the actually most of them are at the Pittsburgh airport as we speak, but it's easy for me to get to. The brackets are custom made. You could use anything you want, but I had those brackets made up by Mark Gingrich. Not cheap, but they worked for what I needed to do. And this is the setup. I mean, you could do anything you kind of want there. Careful with using Swarm Commander because it does get dangerous. They do come to you. So, but that's basically the box there for you.
Mark, or Steve, you have contact info for the brackets by chance?
I don't know if he would be willing to do them commercially.
Well, that or I can make them. I can fabricate them, but it's a nice design.
Yeah, it is. I could email me and I could send you a couple pictures and dimensions and stuff like that. I mean, that's tube aluminum.
Yeah.
I can't remember what I paid for them, but a lot more than what I paid to build the trap. But they're nice because I put a ratchet strap.
Right.
They ratchet strap to the tree. They support hundreds of pounds of weight. I actually even use old, if anybody hunts, old, strap-on tree stands.
I've used those in the past, but I'm out of those right now.
Yeah, just shoot me an email and I could send you pictures and dimensions and stuff like that. So
okay, well, that's good. I just noticed that Dr. Uribe did join us here. This has been really, really good so far. We're going to have to bring it up at the end.
Hey, Ken,
Charlie?
Ken, one more thing, if you don't mind, because I need to.
Yes, go ahead.
Let me share this with everybody because it's a new product that's also out. Since we're talking about new products, there's a new vaporizer out that people might be interested in.
This is for OAV?
Yep. And it's called the Verox Eddy, and it's battery powered. So it's rechargeable, lithium ion. It's made by Oxavap, the same people that do the EasyVap, the Verox, standard plug-in, etc. The battery it does about 10 to 15 hives on one charge. It's not cheap, but it keeps you from having to run carrying batteries around and running extension cord, etc. Go to oxivap.com. I actually did a review on it, so you'll see my ugly mug sitting there. But I go through it. I've used it. It's handy for the backyard beekeeper. It's not going to be good for sideliners. It's just not effective or efficient enough in terms of batteries and charging, etc. But for somebody that has 10 or less hives, it's slick. I mean, it works really, really well. So I wanted to throw that out there and get the word out to everybody that it's there, it's available. Check it out. Let me know if you have any questions. Like I said, I've done the review on it. I've used it several times this spring to test it, and I wouldn't put my name behind it if I didn't think it was worth it. So just wanted to throw that out there for you guys.
That's good. It's something where, you could almost have 3 or 4 people together and buy it, and instead
Yes.
of, just could use it once or twice a year. Something
Right.
could be easily shared. That's a good point. We're going to go to the doctor here. I do want to ask a question to Fred, though. Fred, do you know anything about the new the OAV vaporizer?
Yes, I do. It's battery powered portable. So those of you who can't run an extension cord out to your apiary, it's great because, as Steve already said, they're super portable. It doesn't work for me. The only reason is because the physical thickness of the pan and the shroud around the pan, it doesn't fit into my hives. I have a lot of flow hives. The flow hive 2s, their entrances are too narrow for it.
Okay, good to know.
And it is priced in line with the ProVap 110. The advantage is we don't need to plug it in.
Wow. Okay, we'll come back to this. Has been really educational.
Ken?
Charlie, would you like to introduce our guest speaker?
Let me do one more. We have
Okay.
a question on the chat. Do you allow swarms to relocate naturally in your area? She said, I've had problems with my queens getting open mated. I have allowed swarms to relocate naturally, hoping to improve my queens getting mated. This is in Edinburgh. I guess, well, sometimes you just miss swarms anyway, but as far as them surviving, as feral colonies, they need either a hollow tree or the side of somebody's building. So sometimes if the habitat's not there, you can let all the swarms go you want, but they're not going to make it till the next season if they don't have a place to go. So
Sealy reports that less than 20% of colonies survive their first winter. So it's slim chances. And then upwards of 80 after that, but still it's tough.
That's why I think it's, for a long time, I've considered it critical to have a lot of small beekeepers with empty boxes around, so that, if there's no other place for them to find, hopefully they find a box, because there's just not, hollow trees are they're very rare anymore because the timber industry keeps them pretty much in check. Old fence rows and property lines will still have some hollow trees, and really no one wants them in the side of their house. It's good for the people doing removal business, but otherwise, just things to think about. Don't just let your swarms go unless you can't get them. Sometimes I can't get them.
That happens. I see Fred nodding his head real there. Fred, are you in agreement with that? And then we have to go to the doctor here.
Yeah, I would say 80% do not survive rather than 20% make it, because that answer is better. Anyway, but the thing is, what was I going to say? That's all I had. The other thing is the distances for your swarm traps. They found that 250 meters to 500 meters was prime at that 12-foot height that Steve was talking about. So if you can park your stuff within 250 to 500 meters from your favorite apiary and you want to get all their swarms, do that.
Yeah.
And
so I real quick on that, Fred, I talked to Tom Sealy about that, and I said to him, why the distance? And he said, he said, to be honest, I never set traps close to my apiary, so that's the distance I came up with. So there's really not a scientific approach to that number.
There is.
There is, but really, don't hesitate to set them 50 feet or 100 feet. You'll still catch swarms. It's just farther. It's like anything else. The farther away you put them, the bees can orient, and you can't set I've had bees move right into an empty hive they came from. Doesn't mean it won't work. It's just you're increasing your odds. So,
But there are 2 published studies, and they did it in Arizona, and they did an elliptical distance from the apiary, the only apiary within 9 miles. So there is a published study, but we won't waste time right now. But
published studies don't mean anything, right?
yeah, forget academia.
Right, Margarita?
Okay, so let's introduce our guest speaker. I did want to say something that you do want to find a tree line or an open area where you probably would think would be a good area besides the location and way it faces, but that's important. So, okay, I'm cutting this here. Charlie, you're on. Introduce our guest speaker, please.